So, esteemed guests, welcome to the fifth installment in our 50th anniversary screening series. My name is Alberto Zambenedetti, and I have the good fortune of being the director of the Cinema Studies Institute. Before we proceed, I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across the island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I also wish to thank my colleagues that have made this series possible. At Innis College, Ian Logan, Sean Rogers, Megan McDonald, Ben Westrait, Shayla Anderson, and Charlie Cayo. At CSI, James Cahill, Corinne Columper, Bliss Lim, Tony Pai, and Denise Eng. And at Media Commons, Dylan Reichsey, Dave Pascoe, and Christina Stewart. For those of you who were not able to come to our first 4 screenings, let me give you a bit of context for this series. 2025 is a special year for the Cinema Studies Institute. It was in 1975 that the cluster of film courses taught at the University of Toronto since 1969 was granted the status of a college program. Cinema Studies was then housed officially at Innis College, where we're here today. And in 2007, the college program became an institute and first developed graduate offerings for MA students in 2007 and then PhD students in 2013. Today, we teach approximately 2,500 undergraduate students per year, 350 of which are program students, minor, major, specialists. And we have 55 graduate students in our MA and PhD combined. CSI graduates have gone on to pursue careers in all corners of the profession, from the film industry to academia, from programming to criticism, to becoming novelists in Canada and abroad. By all standards, CSE has become one of the premier locations in the world to study cinema. The 50th anniversary series is meant to celebrate this long and storied history and the people who contributed to shaping it. But it's also an opportunity to think about the students who will join us in the future and whose careers we hope to launch. For this reason, I invite you all to contribute by donating to our Cinema Studies Fund, and there is a surprisingly convenient QR code right behind me in the slide. So now to the main event. It is my privilege to introduce tonight's distinguished guest, Atom Egoyan. Yes. Yes. It is a privilege, but it's also a daunting task to introduce Atom Egoyan. How does one introduce Atom Egoyan? Atom is a leading voice in the Canadian film landscape since the 1980s. He has directed 18 feature films, 11 shorts, 5 films for TV, and I apologize, Adam, if the count is not correct. And his work has garnered numerous awards from the world's most prestigious festivals. He has also directed several operas, created art installations around the globe, served on juries of festivals and art councils. He has been knighted by the French government and received state honors from the Republic of Armenia and is a companion to the Order of Canada. I could introduce Atom by listing his numerous accomplishments and accolades, but I'd rather share an anecdote. In other words, let's make this about me. Many years ago, I was asked to introduce an Italian film noir at TIFF Cinematheque, a big milestone for a junior scholar freshly arrived in Toronto. After the screening, none other than Atom Egoyan approached me to chat about my intro and our shared passion for international film noir. As you can imagine, this was a moment that not only made my night, but truly validated my life choices. And then when I shared this with my Toronto colleagues and students, thinking I was so special, it turned out that everyone had a similar story, an Atom moment, so if you will. So to me, this speaks to the part of Atom's enormous contribution to our community that is not immediately visible if you look at his website or his Wikipedia page or IMDb page, and yet is so extremely impactful. On top of being one of Canada's most important artists, he is a champion of young Canadian directors, an approachable and kind mentor to many, an eager collaborator, and I have benefited from that collaboration myself. Atom has contributed an essay to my last book, and a generous supporter of CSI, where in 2010 he created the Atom Egoyan Cinema Studies Graduate Scholarship. Some of those scholarship recipients are, in fact, in this room tonight. So it is with enormous gratitude that I welcome Atom here tonight, not only because he decided to give us a preview of his last film, Seven Veils, before it's released into theaters on March 7. But it's also because he has truly made a difference in the lives of so many of us here at CSI, including mine. Please join me in welcoming Atom Egoyan.
Wow, that's a really beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. And it's always really so meaningful to be here because I came to Toronto in 1978, and I came to study international relations at Trinity College. But I became very well, what happened is that I presented a play to the Trinity College Dramatic Society, and they turned it down. And out of spite, I thought, okay, I'll make it as a film. So I went to the Hart House Film Board, and I got a $200 grant, and I made the film, and I shot most of it in this building. I shot it, I still see there's the metal steps going up to the library, so there's shots you'll see. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but I did. So this building means a ton. And I also, as you were speaking, the one cinema course I took when I was here was in Italian cinema, Professor Vicari. And at the time, we didn't have this beautiful cinema here. We went to the Italian Cultural Center on St. Clair, and they had a cinema there, and we would go and watch the films in the course. And that's where I was introduced to the work of Pasolini, the work of Bellocchio, the work of Fellini, the work of all these directors, Visconti, that would have so much meaning for me. So it was a very important phase of my life, and the support I got from this community meant a ton to me. And so I am very honored to be able to present this particular film, because in a way I started in theater, and this film is going back and bringing these two worlds together of theater and cinema. So we'll have a conversation afterwards, but it really was a beautiful introduction, and I'm so proud to be an alumni. And again, I think what's happened over the past 50 years with cinema studies has been very heartening, and look where we are. This is just such an amazing space. So I look forward to having the conversation afterwards. Thank you.
I've been asked to make this personal, so I will. Something terrible may happen. This is for you, Charles. The person who wanted me here. I can feel you beside me as I watch. The way your fingers ran over my skin. The electric shock of your touch. How do I bring you back? Bring what we had back. It is thy mouth that I desire. I'm trying to fulfill the original concept.
Yeah, but it's your show now. You're not the same person that you were, and he's not the same person that he was.
Charles is dead.
So he's definitely not the same person.
I've been asked to make this personal, so I am.
It is rare in the life of like a humble administrator like me to brush shoulders with one of the country's most important filmmakers. Even rarer is to do that with two on the same night. In conversation with Atom Egoyan, tonight is CSI's own Red Story. Herself an award-winning filmmaker, but also a geographer and a writer. She's the director of the feature documentaries The Prison in 12 Landscapes, which was released in 2016, The Hottest August in 2019, and Union in 2024. You might remember we had a very successful screening here and Jeanine was shortlisted for an Academy Award. Brett is the author of the book Prisonland, Mapping Carceral Power Across Neoliberal America, which was published by the University of Minnesota Press in 2019, and the co-editor of Digital Life in the Global City, University of British Columbia Press in 2020. She has had fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, the Sundance Institute, and MacDowell. And I could go on to list Brett's accolades, but I think you get the point. We're in for a treat. So please join me in welcoming two of Canada's greatest film artists to the stage, Atom Egoyan and Brett Story.
This is such a treat for me. Thank you. Thanks, Alberta, for that wonderful introduction. And more importantly, thank you to Atom for sharing this remarkable film with us ahead of its theatrical run, which is in a few weeks.
Yeah,
Am I right?
It opens March 7th. So, this is, literally, a few weeks.
Amazing. It's a really beautiful, powerful work. So, there's a lot for us to talk about, but I'm also cognizant of this wonderful audience and all the questions that I'm sure you all have. So I'll start with just a few questions. But maybe first just with the role of the opera. I mean, it's central to this film, of course. You yourself have directed the opera, this opera in particular, Salome, by my count, 4 times, is that right?
7.
7? Okay.
This production. So this production was first mounted in 1996 here at the O'Keeffe, but it's been quite successful. So it's traveled around, and it's. I found out a few years ago, that they were going to remount it 2 years ago, like in 23, and so that's when this idea came, because I sort of felt the time was ripe for a new production. And yet the reality is, it's very expensive to create a new production. So there was this feeling that I wanted to have fresh eyes on it. So I created this character. So Jeanine sort of becomes my fantasy of someone else taking over this production, which she effectively does in this film. And so that was really at the origin of it, was this idea of how to bring that story into this time, because the production is quite old. At the time, it was, I think, the first production ever that uses the dance, which is normally, the singer tries to do a dance, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, for 8 minutes of wonderful music. But this idea of it becoming a flashback was something that I think was done for probably the first time with that production, but I think other people have now explored that idea, because it really is very unusual that in the middle of this music drama you have that music, and it's at such a central moment in the drama, so it's ripe for interpretation.
Yeah, and it makes for a really remarkable viewing experience, because we're essentially witnessing 2 narratives in 2 different forms unfold at the same time, and also invited to think them together, to ask the question as we're learning both of them and experiencing both of them, the question of how they relate to each other, whether they're in tension, at what moments they're in tension, at what moments they're reverberating against each other. And I'm curious to hear you talk about the opera and cinema as 2 distinct forms that you're versed in, but of course you have to, whether or not you're thinking when you're directing an opera, particularly this opera, Salome, differs from how you work and create when you're directing a film.
Well, with an opera, you're not going to change the music, right? The music is there, and you're reacting to the music, and in film, music is the last thing you put on. So this was, I knew that we were going to be using Strauss extensively, and I knew I would be using the music of the dance. And so the work with Michael Dana, who is my longtime composer, who's composed all my films, was different here. And it was a question of how to use some of the motifs and some of the sound design in a way that reflected and then also contrasted. Because, like, for instance, there are instruments that he's using in his score that are not in Strauss's orchestra, and motifs that are separate But I think really it's about this level, this question of interpretation. Like there's so many layers of interpretation, and right from the Bible story to this slew of 19th century writers who were fascinated by this figure of Salome, including Oscar Wilde, and then Richard Strauss sees this production in German, and it's just this line of people interpreting a very, very interesting character. And so in the Bible, it's clear that it's Herodias, Salome's mother, that engineers the dance. But Oscar Wilde made this very bold kind of interpretation where Salome clearly says it's her decision. And she asked for the head of John the Baptist, not her mother. And so, given the radical kind of reinterpretation, I think it's open to be interpreted in a number of different ways. But for those of you who are scholars, it's actually not the first sex crime in biblical history. It's one of many that are recorded. But it's in Jeanine's mind, it is. It's this really important story. And for me, the thing I got really excited about was, and I think we've all had that experience of some work of art that just float, it kind of governs your life. Like there's some piece of music or some album or some movie or some book that you just, it just flows through your life in different ways. And so this story actually, it was transmitted to her from her father, who loved the play, and then she meets Charles, who's, introduces her to the opera, and they have this, crazy whatever relationship that they had, and how this idea of art kind of refracting your own experience and kind of distorting it or enhancing it, or there's so many issues, but I think at the end of the day, you just want to create a character that's memorable, and you want to find the actor that's going to be able to pull that off. So that's what really drove me, is this idea of working with Amanda again, because we did have this really great experience about 15 years ago, and just that's the really the driving force behind this is you want to find a role that presents somebody that you haven't seen in a circumstance that you haven't witnessed. And I think we've seen a lot of films that deal with trauma, but usually in the film it's kind of revealed to them in the film. But in this case, she's aware of what she's been through. She's really it's clear to her what's happened. Many people around her seem to know what's happened. But what she didn't anticipate was that putting herself into this process was going to have this effect, that was going to compel all these other actions.
You sort of feel like she's accepted this invitation to remount this opera, maybe as a means of asserting some agency, some adulthood vis-a-vis her mentor, but within this very narrow, mandate. She's not supposed to be radically reinterpreting it. But then, as you say, she doesn't necessarily have power over it. You see it still wielding this power over her.
Yeah, the institution seems to have its own agenda, right? I think they just wanted, and as she says, it's not as though if they didn't invite her, she would have ever heard of this. So there's something, I do think that, Charles put that in his will, but the fact that Charles's wife, would have actually sought her out and brought her back had its own agenda, and she feels that from the beginning, I suppose, and that there are these restrictions, and that she's completely unsupportive. That there's nobody there that that seems to be supporting her vision of what she wants to do with this, and right down to the fact that her director's notes don't get printed, right? And they seem to want to put a leash on her, but so it creates this real isolation and kind of loneliness. I mean, and then what's happening with her husband and all that craziness, and so I was really drawn to this character. I think as a filmmaker, there has to be, you want to work with the actors that you want to work with, and you want to give them parts that they're going to be able to really be challenged by. And when I watch the film, I just really get excited about what Amanda is doing with this character. It's a really tough character to pull off. And I haven't seen this particular journey before, and I think, and it's just also interesting how, think of all the people who have played Salome, and all the painters who have painted versions of her, and all the writers who have so there's a long tradition of this character flowing through our culture, our Western culture. So it bears investigation. Like, what is it about her that, and it's not, anyway, I'm not an academic. I'm sure there are people here who've written essays about Salome, but it just feels to me that it bears examination, and I really feel like you can remount a piece, but in this case, it's giving a great actress the opportunity to have their take on it, and see what that can generate.
I mean, she is, really a striking, mesmerizing performer, but also the character as it's been written is so captivating. You feel this sort of active struggle, almost at times bordering on panic. Our colleague here at CSI, the film critic Atom Egoyan, who I think is in the audience, has described your films as, quote, giving the impression of rifling through somebody else's personal effects, which is a line I really like. And it seems true not only of this film, but many of your works, that they're kind of littered with both artifacts found and made, and people that are burdened. Sometimes seemingly unburdened. She, as you say, this whatever has happened between her and her father, it is an open secret. It's not hidden. It's not repressed. But she is still haunted by it, and she's haunted by it in a complicated way because it's intertwined with this relationship she's still negotiating with her mentor and her former lover, Charles. So can you talk about, these kinds of characters in your work, what draws you to them, how Jeanine does or does not maybe resemble other characters you've written in your films?
Well, it's this idea that there's this play between what we remember and how we organize these ideas in our own head, but then we have these technologies that are bringing things back in a really clear way, and so then we have to negotiate that. So in this case, whether or not Charles's interpretation was erotically that much more charged or not, in her mind it was, and as she watches this archival tape, she kind of tortures herself because she's feeling that she's not going to be able to bring it to that level. And so it'll be compromised. And it's interesting you use the word panic, because that does kind of induce a certain panic in her, but her own limitations, but also her inability to express what she wants, but it's also maybe that singer's inability to kind of get at something. But so there's this, we are confronted with things in a really clear way by these technologies that we record casual moments by. Like in my, yes, it's true in a lot of the movies, there are these people that stumble across these things in drawers, or they come across these artifacts that suddenly they have to recalibrate their understanding of what might have happened. And there's a way that things might settle in our own mind, and we might come to peace with those things, but then there's the sharp reality of how technology can play that back and slap us in the face sometimes. And that's used in films a lot now, right?
Well, it's interesting in this film because I feel like there's, the question of the gaze feels very present. There's a lot of characters who are, who are, exert power by looking or not looking.
Yeah.
The figure of the head, the moment at the very end where the understudy's eyes, are sort of the most gently caressed and cared for. And then this technology of video, and the idea that in this video captures a version of Jeanine in which she's vulnerable not only because she's a child, but because she's blindfolded.
Yeah.
And the extreme vulnerability of that's captured in a technology that will live and relive over and over again.
And yet, purportedly, the father is doing that to enhance her ability to taste and to prove something about the other senses. But there's something else going on, obviously, and it's. That's an interesting scene, right? Because there's a way that she might remember that nostalgically, that the father was trying to teach her, that your taste is enhanced when you can't see, but then she has to deal with the technology, that recording, which says, okay, there's something more ominous here. This isn't just that. So, and I think that's, it's to me part of our dramaturgy now. Like as we've and yes, it was mentioned before about Marshall McLuhan, and it's very much part of our thinking that, you know, our relationship to technology does become, you know, intrinsically involved with how we understand and define our relationships. And yeah, I've tried to use that in a lot of the movies. But, you know, again, I mean, there's an amazing movie that very few people have seen by Fritz Lang called Lilium, which he made in this period when he was leaving Germany to come to the States, and he made it in French. And it's jaw-dropping how prescient that is, because anyway, I can talk about that film, but we're here to talk about mine. But it's the first example, I think, in film history. Before he made Metropolis, and, you know, you see video monitors in there, but it's a character where he commits this violent act. He actually murders his wife, played by Charles Boyer, and then he's killed, and he's judged. He goes to purgatory, and he's judged by the angel, and he says, "I didn't kill my wife," or "I didn't mean to kill her." And then Fritz Lang plays back a scene, like he's taken to a screening room, and there's what looks like a video before there's video, and we see the scene that we saw in the film before projected to him. And this is like 1931. So, you know, this idea of our relationship to technology and experience was anticipated really from the beginning of talking cinema, and it's just, you know, we can't answer this question of, you know, when we dream at night, do we dream in coverage? Do we dream in? That's why I always feel like. Anyway, I could go on and on. Yeah, I told you before, like, don't get me talking. So,
well, we're here for it. We're here for it.
No, but it's like, you know, I've always thought about this. And one morning I woke up and I said to my wife, "Hey, I've got the answer, because in my dream I'm asking is this being covered with master shots and two shots? And they're showing me that yes, this is how the dream is constructed." And she just looked at me and said, "Yeah, but that's your dream. Like that's not any proof, and you're not going to be able to use that in any way." I was going, "Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no way we can understand how we actually exchange these images." But in that film by Fritz Lang, it was really clear that the way the cinema was actually showing that scene was played back as a part of his subconscious memory of it, which was very moving to me.
I mean, and technology changes, but of course culture changes too. And you first mounted the opera Salome for the Canadian Opera Company in 1996.
Yes.
And then in 2023.
Yes, and a number of other times in different places before around.
Right. But so I'm curious how that experience, your experience of restaging that opera just recently, did it feel different? Does it feel like a different moment to be bringing that to audiences?
I mean, because, look, I mean, we were talking about this before. When we showed that opera in 1996, it was pretty shocking. Like, the images that were shown with the projection and what happens in the forest were very upsetting to people. But we would never have thought at that time that, you know, people needed to be prepared for that. It sort of felt like we were at this moment where, you know, that was part of what a work of art did. But I think we are now entering into a really different phase. And so, you know, people are way more sensitive to that issue. And there are things that that production might have been criticized for as being, look, yes, times have changed radically from 1996. And I think that's part of what I felt like in remounting this. Like, did we need to remount that particular production? And I had issues with that. But and speaking of agendas, even if I said I will not remount it, the company owns that production, so it would still go on. So I can't pull the plug on it. You know, it's not my production. So given the fact that it was going to be presented on this stage, as it was 2 years ago, I felt that there might be a response that could be, that I could write to this. And that was at the origin of this film. So that's what I'm offering.
Let's open it up to the audience. Oh, questions already. There's one question in the back. Yeah.
Thank you for the film, and thank you for being here. This was marvelous.
Thank you.
On the subject of technology, I also read the Zoom calls or Skype or what have you as I guess another a form of staging of sorts. Like I couldn't help but think that in the last few years, as that became a commonplace thing. Like we're also kind of making ourselves up, in a lot of those calls, at least in a business context. I was just wondering if that was intentional as well, as another sort of layer of, I guess, like the various stages and video, layers throughout Jeanine's life.
I mean, it could well be that for all the directions she's giving to the performers on stage and in the rehearsals, that the most resonant direction she gives is to her husband's lover to deface the painting, and that she witnesses that in this mediated way, right? She's not there. She doesn't deface it herself. There's something about getting that other person to deface it, and actually that is even signed with a deal. That relationship continue. It's all about these negotiations. But the question which you're proposing, which is a great question, is our ability to actually feel these things tempered by these technologies. Like, would she have actually engineered that if she was there? Wouldn't she just have done that herself, right? So this idea of, choreographing our behavior because of what the technology gives us in terms of a distance. And so in the same way that when she watches these archival videos in the apartment she's given, is the experience of that enhanced? Is it sort of, if she was remembering that production, it wouldn't have had the same effect as when she's watching it, or even that book, that weird book that he made, and the flip book, the imposition of these technologies as a way of generating feeling, or specific feelings. I do think that's, because it's another proscenium, right? It's another, it's the way that stage is a box, the video is a box, and she's choreographing people within it.
Yeah, in the green shirt.
I was wondering. Yeah, that's fine. Right? Okay. Was there any tension with the Toronto Opera, like when you said, "I'm gonna make this movie," like while directing it, and like, since you're
That's a really
showing
good
kind of like ongoings that are happening within the opera company? Yeah.
It's a very good question. I was really clear with the opera company that yes, the two things would be happening. Well, first of all, you need their permission, obviously, and I was a little bit naive because I felt that it would be something that I could do as a fly on the wall. Like during the rehearsal, I'd just be shooting this film, but of course, it's not that simple, and so there's a whole crew, and so they needed to be involved, and it was important that remount be staged before the film began, right? So I finished my duties, my responsibilities as a theater director before I switched into the film direction, knowing, of course, that some of the singers many of them are going to be in the film as well. So you have this very specific schedule, right? Because they're performing in the evening and their days off, and can you shoot with them on their days off while they're in Toronto? So that all had to be negotiated with the company. So that's why the Canadian Opera Company has a presentation credit, because they ended up being incredibly helpful, and I wouldn't have been able to do this if I didn't have their cooperation, and that was important to get from the very beginning. But it's a good question because it is. Contractually, when you are contracted to do a theater piece, you're not supposed to be doing anything else. So I broke the contract, to make the film, but they understood that was part of what I was doing.
Yeah, right here.
There's two questions. Yeah.
So I've noticed in this film, Seven Veils, that Amanda's character, I think, speaks about Charlie as if she kind of idolizes her. Sorry, she kind of idolizes him, right? And I think with a lot of art pieces from the past, for example, the opera present in this film and Shakespeare's Twelfth Night or whatever else, we have a kind of desire that is all encapsulating and incredibly lustful. But in your films, this one and your breakout film Exotica, there is that kind of lust between, for example, two characters, the main character and the babysitter, and here we feel the same kind of energy between Amanda and Charlie, right, Charles. So I wonder if it's that human relationships have progressed from a point of pure desire, whether it's lust or whether it's pure love, to this kind of more complicated kind of traumatic bond between, you know, two different people who might have abused each other. So what is your...
Okay, that's a really complicated question and great question. It's at the core of a lot of what I do, I guess, which is that, I mean, my understanding or my feeling of what constitutes erotic energy is where there's some sort of a vacuum, that you feel that there's something that's empty and that contact with that other person can fill that vacuum or that emptiness you feel in you. And that becomes kind of overwhelming. And that creates this tension, which I would say is erotic tension. So lust is part of that, but I do think that it's just this feeling that you need someone else to fill something missing in you. So in these two dramas, like there's something, this question of feeling as one, like worthy of being loved. I think it's very difficult to have gone through what she experienced with her father in this film. So when she meets Charles, I think that has an effect on her, and he understands that. We never meet him. We don't know who he is, but there's that feeling that there was something incredibly charged about that, and maybe inappropriate as well. Like often those things are, and as a dramatist, you're trying to explore it without judging the characters, but understanding what the complications are, and obviously what the responsibilities should be. So, yeah, it's a loaded question, but you know, so people people are drawn, and they sometimes lose a sense of where those boundaries are. And can cause, you know, incredible harm and pain on other people. And I think when we were talking about Sweet Hereafter, what was interesting to me about that film is just this idea of like people not understanding how they have been victimized and hurt until something makes that clear to them. And then they have to respond and redefine what that whole relationship is about. So, yeah. Yeah, these are big questions. Sorry, okay. The question here as well. Yeah.
It's not a deep question.
No, that's good. I'd like to have a non-deep question. Ask me something totally silly. It's great when people laugh as well, because there is humor in the film. So I love watching it with an audience, because like people are getting that there's kind of it's wonky at certain times. There's something sometimes kind of foolish and silly. So ask a silly question,
sure.
Please.
Well, it was well done, first of all. Very
Thank you.
well done. I know it premiered at TIFF in 2023, so I was wondering why it took over a year for a theatrical release, especially because I heard it was very well received.
Yeah, it's really tough now to get a theatrical release. It's super tough. So we were waiting for the U.S. deal. And, you know, honestly, it was, I think people are having a really, like, no matter how well received it might be, it's very difficult to market, because a lot of people get scared about the opera idea, right? Like, you know, and so you want to say, and for those of you who have seen the trailer, you'll notice there's no opera music in it, because you don't want to scare people away with the idea that there's opera. And it's not an opera film, and you don't need to know anything about this opera to watch the film, right? So, but yet people will refer to it as an opera movie, and that is the kiss of death, apparently, commercially. So we're just trying to. So we finally, you know, have the U.S. deal, and they're brave enough to kind of put it out. But we were waiting with the Canadian release, because the film went to the Berlin Film Festival last year, and we have all the European sort of deals, and all that is set up. But it's better to release films in this country if it's being released in the States at the same time. Though, of course, now with tariffs, you're going to be paying 25% extra. So, yeah.
Adam, as someone who's been making films for 4 decades or so, how attached are you to the theatrical experience? Is that important for you as a way of seeing these films?
Such a good question. I mean, yes, because I just love the concentration people have when they watch things in a cinema, right? They are, for the most part, not distracted. I mean, there are distractions, but you know that the film is going to run, and if you leave, you have to come back, and you're kind of, as a filmmaker, you have people's attention in a different way than if they're watching it on devices. But I just might be of a certain generation, because it's clear to me that there is a whole, like when you look at people's response to really slow cinema, that they're watching on their devices. I might be wrong. Like I think it's possible to concentrate on a Tarkovsky film or a Lav Diaz film, 7 hours. I mean, I guess if you make the commitment to that, then you can have that same experience. But so.
I did notice you watching most of the film from the back and wondered about that vantage, if you wanted to be able to see the
I just
whole
wanted to
room.
get it, because I'll be, to your point, I haven't watched it with an audience for a while. So, and I'm this week, like starting tomorrow, I'm doing a lot of press for the film. So I wanted to see how it played, because I just was disconnected from that a little bit. And I'm on to other things, right? So I wanted to feel it again with an audience. And you get that better from the back, and you, it was really lovely to screen it at this point, like right before doing these interviews, like tomorrow, starting tomorrow. I'm on a weird podcast with this American place where it looks like I'm in it's called a film art house, something, and it looks like you're on a screen in an art house.
Is this in LA?
Yes.
Yes, I've done that. It's totally bizarre.
Yes.
Yeah. You're looking at your computer, but,
but
you're
then
on this massive
exactly.
screen.
So
Yeah.
I was looking at this going, whoa, I better watch it on the screen so I have a sense of what I'm actually supposed to be feeling like. Yeah.
Hopefully it won't be as awkward as the podcast.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Yes.
So, right.
Hold on, there's a mic coming to you, right here. Yeah.
I find your passion so refreshing, and it's palpable throughout the movie. Like, you're very intentional. And if I may, just being mindful of the time, if I can ask like 2 questions very quickly. Sure. One of them, I see that shadow is a big thing in the film. Obviously, because a lot of people are hiding secrets, they're dealing with past trauma. And even aesthetically, you do a lot of interesting things where there's like dimly lit spaces. From a technical standpoint, how hard was that finding areas that, complemented your subject while still playing into that shadow element that seems to be prevalent throughout the film? And then my second question, really quick, trying to be very mindful of time. Amazing panel, and love everything that's been happening so far tonight. But my second question is, Telefilm, Ontario Creates, you have all these phenomenal funding companies involved with your film. Being young filmmakers, what was the process getting that funding for a film that's so ambitious and so unique?
Really great questions. Okay, for the first question, because it's a piece of theater, the way you light for theater is really different from the way you light for film. But because we knew we'd be spending a lot of time on stage using the theatrical light, we gave ourselves permission to make the film lighting more theatrical than it might be, because the two would be flowing in and out of each other. So you're right, there's a lot more use of shadow, and you can enhance that in post now really easily as well. So that governed a lot of those choices. The idea that we were like, it's there from the very beginning of the film. When it sweeps across the theater to the stage, you're seeing kind of what the palette is and what the contrast is like. we were just talking about this before. Like I started when I shot this short when I was here when I was 18 in this building and at Robarts, the stairs of Robarts, and from that short. And these small grants I was getting from the Hart House Film Board, I started applying for like grants from Ontario Arts Council and Canada Council, because I'm not coming from a place where I have family money and stuff like that. So it's like I really needed to get these grants. So those were really important parts of my like the building blocks. I shot my first feature for $25,000, and we shot it in Kensington Market, where I was living at the time after I graduated. So the thing that people don't understand about my career is that it's been really step by step by step. So like Exotica, which did have telefilm money, like I didn't get telefilm money until like a couple of projects in. Because at the time, telefilm was not doing that type of work. They were doing like tax shelter, like American kind of style commercial films. So I think that it's, and the really amazing thing now is that there are programs for lower budget films where you don't need to have distribution in place, like Talent to Watch and things like that. So there is, it's a competitive, like anything else is, but there are these, opportunities to apply. It gets trickier when you're dealing with a bigger budget like this, because you need to have market interest. So you have to kind of come in with a distribution deal, and you have to show them that there is market interest, internationally, hopefully. So you get a sales agent, and it's just. But if you're at the beginning of your career, you don't need to worry about that so much. It's more just, as you said, passion, like and finding the people you're going to work with, and everyone just working super hard on a crazily small amount of money. But here's the really encouraging thing: is that when I say I made my first feature for $25,000 in 1984. Most of that was spent on film stock, right? So I think, and I've said this, and I really think that I could still make that feature the way I shot it now with digital technology. And it would look better, it would sound better. So it's like you just really don't let the idea of how films are normally made prevent you from like just telling a story if you're passionate enough about it. Like look at the two biggest Oscar contenders this year, like The Brutalist and Anora. They were made for like really small amounts of money and unbelievable production value because people were just super passionate about it. So that's what you have going for you at this point, is just working with your friends and, like even the people I was working with 40 years more, what am I saying, 45 years ago at the Hart House Film Board. There was like just a group of us that were using the tech, the cameras and the editing equipment they had there. I will say at that time it wasn't as competitive. Like it wasn't like something that everyone wanted to do. And here's the crazy thing: is that equipment that I was using was the same equipment that David Cronenberg was using when he was at U of T before me. So that's also was kind of like, oh, this is the same Aeroflex that he must have been using. So it was kind of it's interesting. Like given the fact that we don't have film production technically at U of T, right? Still, but it's amazing. Like there is this. Tradition of filmmakers coming through here who are studying other stuff or doing cinema studies, but using the energy of this place, and it's really a special energy, of course, and that's what we're celebrating. Yeah, yay U of T, right? So yeah.
So there's someone with a pink hat that's been waiting very patiently.
Oh, yes.
Over here.
I have to say it's really, really great to be here. This is a really nice way to launch the kind of the release of the film. It's really special. So thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I just have two quick questions. The first one is you mentioned Visconti earlier in your introduction, and he's also a director who worked extensively with opera in between his cinematic endeavors. I'm just wondering, how do you think I think the operatic impulse is very palpable throughout his career. And how do you think your experience with directing opera sort of translated into your other works?
It's a really good question. Yes, Visconti has worked a ton in opera. Music, it's music drama. I had this incredible moment where here at U of T, I was in a production of Wozzeck by Buchner, and it was a student production, and I was playing the doctor, and someone in the production said, "Hey, there's an opera based on this by Alban Berg. Actually, it's being put on by the COC later this year." But I remember listening to the opera, and I just got so excited that, oh my God, here's the drama. It's the same play, like this is. This is the same play that Oscar Wilde wrote, but it's suddenly given this amazing music. So that relationship between music and image is something that's been really important to me from the first shorts, because I play music. My sister's a pianist, and so she was playing like piano on my early films, and it's just a sensitivity to how well music can be integrated into drama. Visually, you have to be careful. I mean, I think there's some people might say that my films shifted when I started doing opera, and maybe like in a way that some people might find, because I did understand that something shifted when I started doing opera, where I was just tonally the dramas changed a little bit, because the music became way more kind of prominent, but you can't resist that. Like when you have a great piece of music and it fits with what's happening dramatically. Sometimes it's a song, right? Like in Exotica, using Everybody Knows, right? Where you hear the song and it has to be in the film. And but Visconti, there's kind of a tradition of opera and cinema. There's some really interesting uses in film, but it's Visconti is a fascinating character, just in terms of how we move from neo-realism to these more incredible costume dramas, and how he was able to, his opera productions are so lavish, and they're still mounted, right? They're still in the repertoire because they were such beautiful productions.
My second question is, are you planning any future productions with opera?
Yes, I'm doing a production of Yennefer with the Opera de Montréal, so at the Place des Arts. So that'll be in November of next year. And then I'm off to do a play in April, May at the Gorky Theater in Berlin. But that's a play. It's not an opera. But I'm still really involved in theater. Like, theater is something that's really close to me. I mean, obviously, as you can see in this film, and it's what I was doing mostly when I was here. I was putting on plays a lot at U of T as well. It was an incredibly fertile period for me. Being here was something that really shifted. I came to Toronto thinking I was going to be one thing, and then it kind of shifted while I was here, and I left knowing that I wanted to be like in the arts, right?
I'm so sorry to end the conversation here, but you can tell what a generous human being Atom is. So I'm sure he'll linger for a couple minutes. I do want to say, and we'll give another round of applause in a second, but I do want to say it can be challenging, or we're told it's challenging to get people in theaters. So I want all of you to raise your hand if you're going to tell 2 friends to go out and catch Seven Veils in the theater when it opens March 7th. Please.
Thank you.
Get people in the theaters where we can experience cinema together on the big screen with our whole attention.
Wow,
Atom,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
This has been so wonderful.
Thank you.